Random ramblings. Um, it's weird that we have a democratic Republican experiment for a government, but we're moving towards such an anti-science platform with the government. I find this really, really counterintuitive to this like weird social experiment that is our country, mostly because that doesn't work to allow the experiment to continue. The Republican democracy is an experiment. It's an admitted experiment. It's something that nobody thought should, probably would work, and it's working. But like an experiment, you have to keep messing with it and messing with the parameters and that kind of thing, so that when you do have to like change the course of the experiment, so I don't know, you allow capitalism to come into play because free market sounds like a good idea, which it did at the time, I'm sure. But now, yeah, I mean, democratic republicanism, like that's a really weird hybrid experiment. So maybe it's time to experiment again and throw something else in with the capitalism. I'm not here to give an answer. I'm just here to ask questions because that's what science is. I'm recording it, and I'll come back and talk about it later. But that's what science is. If you don't record your findings and you don't, I don't know, very much like go back and adjust your hypothesis, make sure that everything's up to date and that kind of thing. It's not science. It's just fucking around if you don't follow the method. And what's the point of doing it if all you're doing is fucking around? Do a different experiment. You know, try a different subject. I don't know. Why continue experimenting if you're not going to experiment properly? But that's just me. I hope you guys don't mind if I smoke, if anybody's actually going to watch this. Quick confession with YouTube, I actually, for a long time, kept clicking the video and finding out that the views went up and I was too stoned and or concussed to realize that that was me looking at it. And yeah, I get a little fucked up sometimes in the head. It happens. It's weird. Weird world, man. Anyways, so back to experimenting. I gotta wonder, like, with the current way that the experiment's going, with the way that we're rocking out in this weird free world that we created. Because the experiment did work with different ways that it was implemented in different places to a varying degree of success all across the world. But I don't know, man. I mean, we're the innovators. Like America, with this grand experiment, changed the way that everything works. So, in changing the way that everything works societally, in like the social contract and constructs that we follow and we use to govern ourselves just voluntarily now, kind of like a positive peer pressure, I guess. I don't know what the proper term would be. But I really feel as though it's one of those things that I just there's got to be a few tiny changes to the social experiment to make it still valid, to have the findings still be helpful, and not just finding out what cocaine does to a lab rat's sex drive. I mean, one of the many random experiments that is funded all the time by every government that has a scientific research division department and sort of thing. I really I would love to see this experiment stay relevant. I really would. And it's one of those things that for everything to work right and for science to continue being like, functioning as science and what it's supposed to be, which is the advancement of knowledge, you have to advance the parameters that you're working within your experiment. So in this social experiment, we've been working with democracy and republicanism together as a way to function. So we use the direct vote to get the people that we have making the votes that actually make a difference, because that way the founding fathers and a lot of other different societies and cultures that they idealized and romanticized, that are continually idealized and romanticized, like the Grecians and the Romans, the Grecans and the I don't understand entirely. Um, but yeah, it's one of those deals that like they did the Republican and the Democratic form, but they only did one or the other. Or they didn't do one or the other, they did both at the same time. So you had direct votes on a lot of national policy and a lot of, oh, what do they call it? Local governmental nation states. And this is why it's important to pay attention, Western Civ kids. Um, so with those nation states, they usually had like a direct, like a democratic process where you directly vote on things and that sort of thing. And the weird thing that would go on then is that for the Federal Assembly, the National Assembly is like bigger than the nation states. So like them Assyria, no, it's fake. I'm kidding. I know. But I was trying to think of something other than Athens and Sparta, because I spent a lot of money to take Western Civ like twice because I failed it and whatnot. Yeah, that was a lot of money, pretty okay spent. Um, beg my self-deprivation, beg the pardon of my self-deprivation there. Excuse me. But no, so I mean, it was one of those things that they would have like the Grecian nation federation meeting thing every so often, and they would argue and have a battle over who would get to host it until they figured out to write the fucking place down. And then they would elect representatives that became part of the republic, the republic thing that Rome adopted, which everybody is like very familiar with. It's, Plato wrote a giant boring ass book about it that I've been trying to read for like 6 months. So boring though. So boring. But yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely one of those things that using that system on the national scale, and I'm talking about the Republican system where you vote for people that then do the voting for you, but also doing a democratic scale up to a certain point still with city and county and I want to say district and ward and in certain areas there's parishes and boroughs and there's a lot of things. Um, those are a mix between Democratic and Republican ways of voting. And I don't mean like, red and blue. I'm talking like way older than that, very, very long time ago, before the parties were even thought of. This is what the parties were founded on 160 almost years ago, 150 years ago, something like that. Somewhere in between there for the one and the other one. Oh, goodbye, Vern Troyer. What do you call it? Yeah, it predates that by centuries, if not millennia. I want to say centuries. I don't think it was millennia at that point. Might have been. Could be wrong. Anyways, so yeah, it's like, it's one of these things that, like, I don't know, it really, we're working off of archaic systems here for the foundation of the experiment. And honestly, it's one of these things that something's got to shift. This is the only landmass that hasn't had a shift in borders in, like, I want to say 100 years. More than 100 years. In that case, big pardon again, it means that we also have to wonder, do we want to shift the borders? Do we want to do that kind of thing? Or do we just want to shift the parameters of the experiment? Capitalism is snuck in a big way in making policy and law. And it's weird. It's so weird that this kudzu vine of capitalism is just like taking over and leaving these weird power vacuums that crime fills in. I think it's really weird. I don't know. I like it a little bit. Is this interesting thing that we have to deal with in our experiment? This outlier, this variable that really nobody could have accounted for, and other things in the natural system known as like the marketplace popped up to kind of combat that somewhat. I feel like white blood cells in cancer patients and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that I'm fucking might be saying that like capitalism is a cancer, but I mean don't take me for like some Che Guevara t-shirt wearing douche. Like it's actually an Avengers hooded like sleeveless t-shirt and like a cut off like Flashdance looking sweatshirt. So yeah, it's not one of those. I'm a different kind of weird. Just a heads up. Um, hey man, I'm speaking into the void. The void is talking to you. Okay, okay. So this is my deal with the main thing, and it's that this experiment has gotten stale, and as such, the bacteria, fungi, cancers, whatever you want to call them, are creeping in and taking over and strangling the livelihood of the initial experiment, which was founded on something that is it's an idea, so it's always permanent and it's always there. I mean, to quote people that have quoted people, somebody smart said it. Now I'm saying it to you, which makes it a quote. That's what makes it quote worthy. Um, it really is. It's this thing that we got to figure out how to make the idea still worth something. I look at the British monarchy, and yeah, it's outdated, it's old-fashioned, it's whatever. It's still there to use as a focal point for that intangible thing that it's a mix of hope and it's a mix of nostalgia. It's a touch of look into the past and to the future to try to create a better present. Because really, at the end of the day, if you're working towards a better future and you're learning from the past, isn't that a beautiful day? Come on now. All right, man. So that was me smoking a cigarette and rambling into the void, man. I hope you liked it, void. All right, I'll squawk back at you later.